All right, I love this topic. This week, we're going to talk about the 6 things you need to know to pass your practical exam. Now, I assure you, we have so much experience in helping people pass their practical exam. So if you need help passing, head over to our website or just email us and we'll help you get started. Okay, let's talk about the 6 things you need to know to pass your practical exam. So, number 1, make a study plan. I know this sounds so simple, but seriously, it's so important. So start early, okay? Like really early. So normally we suggest anywhere from 4 to 6 months to prepare for your practical exam. If you know you're a little bit slower of a learner, if you know that anxiety is going to be a real kind of problem for you, or you have no practical experience at all, then you might want to think about 6 months plus. If you're a Canadian student, then we typically look at anywhere from about 8 weeks to 12 weeks. So again, it really is a self-reflection of where you're at. And the next thing with your study plan is find some partners. If you're able to study face-to-face, I suggest groups of 3. That way, 1 can be a physio, 1 can be a marker, and 1 can be the actor. If you have to do this virtually, so you're not near anyone else preparing for the exam, try to stick to a group of 2. And when you're meeting virtually on Skype or FaceTime or whatever it is, 1 member would be the physio and the other one would be the actor and the marker. Now, the marker is the most important role. It's really critical that you're so good at this role because that's when you're going to watch the physio do what they're doing, give them feedback on what they're doing wrong, and it really gives you a chance to be analytical of the performance. And seriously, this is when the learning happens. So take that marker role very seriously. Okay, and next you want to make sure that you're not just memorizing. You have to understand. You want to go through all the information in a step-by-step process so that you're organized during the station. So again, have a plan. Tip number 2 is know how to perform mobilization stations. Now, these again are such important stations on your exam. They're pretty much guaranteed. So in our practical course, we give our students a mobility manual. And here is where we explain how to do literally every transfer you could see on the exam. And we give you a step-by-step guide as to when you should be doing certain transfers, how you should do each transfer, and when you should be choosing to use different gait aids with those transfers. But alas, there's a good kind of 6-step process that you should follow with every mobilization station. Number 1, is it their first time getting up? You're going to have a different plan if they haven't been up in the last day or 2 or if they've already been up getting around. Number 2, you want to set up the room. This is critical, okay? Next, you want to set up the patient. You're then going to set up the transfer aid or gait aid if there is one needed for the station. And then last, you set up the gait aid and then you perform the transfer. Next up is point number 3, and what you need to know for this one is you need to know your contraindications and precautions. Now, this is one that is a struggle for both internationally trained and Canadian trained students. Now, usually Canadian trained students in the school, they focus you a little bit to know, when you're going to say a contraindication or when you just get down to business and go through the station. But that's something that we definitely pride ourselves on, that we teach you when you're going to stop and clear contraindications, and literally when you read the question and just say, I don't need to do that, I'm going to go forward with the station. So there are 2 types of kind of contraindication precaution categories that I want you to practice. The first one is when you're performing a treatment. So something like percussions and vibrations. It could be something where you're doing a modality like IFC for a patient, or when you're prescribing an exercise for, say, an osteoporosis patient. The second type of contraindication and precaution is when you're using a certain type of equipment. So say you're using a chest tube or a catheter or an IV, there's a certain set of contraindications and precautions you want to follow. So make sure you practice each of those types of stations. All right, point number 4, you have to master exercise prescription. Again, this is a guarantee on your exam. You know this is going to be there, and these really should be easy marks because you should be totally prepared for it. So just like every other major station on the exam, we give you frameworks to make sure you know exactly what to do in an organized fashion. So for exercise prescription, the framework goes as followed. Number 1, find the appropriate exercise. And again, this needs to be relevant for their stage of healing that they're at. So you're going to give a different exercise if they're day 2 ACL versus if they're 2 months post ACL repair. Number 2, you are going to demonstrate the exercise. Yes, you need to demonstrate it. Now, I always get a lot of questions around this, like, do you get down on the floor and demonstrate it? Those are secrets that we'll save for the course, but I'll let you kind of think about it. Number 3, have the patient perform the exercise, okay? Really important to watch what they're doing. And number 4, give them feedback, okay? Another thing we go over is if they're doing it perfect, do you give them feedback or do you just say, looks great? Think about that one. And number 5, prescribe using the FIT principles. And again, you want to break down those FIT principles. They're super important and there's marks allocated for each step of that process. All right, point number 5, you need to practice like you play. So this is so important. I'm going to give you a bit of a laundry list of things you can do to make sure that you're getting the most out of your practice. So number 1, limit water. I know this sounds crazy, but you really don't get bathroom breaks on the exam. You'll either start on the 10-minute track or the 5x5-minute track. So in between when you go and switch, you will get a chance to go to the bathroom and they give you some snacks too, but that's pretty much it. So get trained, or train your bladder, if you will, of not going to the bathroom all the time. The next thing I want you to do is allow the proper amount of time to read questions. So if you only get a minute to read the question, stop at a minute. If you get 2 minutes, stop at 2 minutes. On the flip side to that, if you do get 2 minutes, take the full 2 minutes. Sometimes you get thrown off in that last 30 seconds that you're waiting. You start second guessing what you're going to do on the station. So really make sure you're taking that full amount of time when you're practicing. Okay. Next up, you really do want to practice those 8-minute mark questions because remember, those change the format of the station. When you're creating your stations to practice, if you do have an 8-minute mark question, you can't go back and finish your interaction. So really important to practice those type of stations. Next, practice with intensity. And seriously, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. When I do see people studying and they're kind of joking around, or they say, oh, I wouldn't actually do that on the exam. Make sure everything you practice is exactly like what you would do on the exam. How you practice is how you are going to play. Okay. The next thing is you really want to have a mixture of stations. So practice 10-minute stations and practice 5x5-minute stations. Okay. It's no excuse to say you don't have stations to practice. You should be able to create stations. Okay. So don't let that fall as an excuse. Next is you want to really make sure that you're only using a small pad of paper to practice with, okay? So don't go in with notes, don't have notes on the side. Make sure that you're only allowing that small piece of paper. And you need to know that after you're done that set of stations, so if you're doing the 10-minute track first, you then have to hand in that pad of paper as well, all right? Next thing we're going to talk about is when you're working through these questions, you want to mimic the exam scenario. So a lot of students do find those 5x5-minute stations harder. Pretty much everyone I talk to after the exam says those are the trickier ones. So brace yourself. If you have those first, take a sip of air and breathe. At least you're done those, okay? If you know those are coming up, gear yourself for, they're going to be a little bit disorganized. You're going to hear people talking. There's going to be some chaos when you're transferring from the clinical interaction to the written interaction. So just make sure you're aware there is going to be some chaos there, okay? And make sure you plan your time accordingly. All right, last but not least, tip 6. So make sure you have a wonderful introduction, okay? You want to make sure that you're clear, to the point, concise. This is when your examiner is going to make their first impression of you. And as we all know, first impressions are everything. This is going to trickle their opinion of you throughout the whole station. So I'm not going to go through this now. I'm going to link the video so you can watch Mastering Your Introduction. So check that out, all right? My last point is number 7. This is a bonus tip here. So this is take a course. We're masters of teaching you how to get through this exam. So we have a practical course, which we have face-to-face options, which are all across Canada. But if you don't live in a major city or you're prepping, say, from somewhere else in the world, we also have virtual options for you, okay? If you don't feel like you need a full course, we do have the crash course. This is a good option for someone who just needs to figure out how the questions are going to be asked. You want some questions to practice. You want to see the answer keys. Our answer keys are crazy. They're like 6 pages long, but they're really helpful because it makes you see how you need to focus going through the stations. It also gives you a mini manual. So our big manual is like 465 pages of all frameworks for your exam. But the mini manual is going to go over some kind of smaller frameworks. It's going to give you an idea of how to go through kind of some of the major stations, and that'll allow you to create your own frameworks for the exam. So if you do have questions, just send me an email to info@ptexamprep.ca and I'll be sure to get back to you. Or comment below and I'll definitely message you as well. Thanks for joining me.